In a world where leaders rise and fall, where presidents come and go with the passing of political seasons, one man has remained at the helm of his nation longer than any other living president on Earth. This is the story of the world's longest-serving president still in office. And today, on World Unveilers, we open the pages of a political era that has outlived generations, survived global transformations, and continues to shape the destiny of an entire nation. Before we begin, remember to subscribe to World Unveilers for more powerful stories from every corner of the world. Now, let's dive into the journey of a leader whose time and power has become almost mythical in modern political history. Our story takes place in the small but oil-rich nation of Equatorial Guinea, located on the western coast of Central Africa. A country with lush rainforests, deep cultural heritage, and a turbulent political past. And at the center of that history stands one man, Teodoro Obiang Nguema Mbasogo. Born in 1942 in the remote town of Akawakan, Obiang grew up in a world very different from the one he would later rule. Equatorial Guinea at the time was under Spanish colonial rule, and the country was far from stable. Poverty was widespread, political awareness was rising, and independence movements were gaining momentum across Africa. When Equatorial Guinea finally gained independence in 1968, the nation elected its first president, Francisco Macias Nguema. But instead of guiding the young country toward a hopeful future, Macias led it down a path of repression, fear, and brutality. His rule became one of the harshest dictatorships in African history. The country was plunged into terror. Thousands fled, thousands more vanished. And quietly watching this chaos unfold was a young military officer, Teodoro Obiang. Obiang served in government roles under his uncle Macias, but he witnessed the deepening horrors firsthand. The nation's economy collapsed, foreigners fled the country, education systems crumbled, people lived in constant fear. Even speaking against the regime meant risking your life. The world looked away, and Equatorial Guinea faded into silence.
But in 1979, something changed. Power shifted, and history took a dramatic turn. On August 3rd of that year, Obiang led a military coup that overthrew his uncle. It was a moment that would define the future not only of his family, but of the entire nation. Macias was captured, tried, and executed. And from the ashes of a collapsing dictatorship, Teodoro Obiang Nguema Mbasogo took the reins of leadership. At first, many citizens celebrated. The fall of Macias brought hope, a promise of stability, a chance to rebuild, a new beginning. And Obiang positioned himself as the leader who would restore the nation and heal its wounds. But what no one knew was that this new beginning would grow into one of the longest periods of continuous presidential rule the world has ever seen. Obiang became president officially in 1982, and from that moment onward, his grip on power strengthened year after year. Elections were introduced, but they were far from competitive. Opposition voices grew quieter, and slowly, a new era of centralized power took shape. However, unlike his predecessor, Obiang opened the door to something that would change the country forever: oil. In the early 1990s, major oil reserves were discovered in Equatorial Guinea. And suddenly, this once struggling nation became one of the richest countries per capita in Africa. Billions flowed into government hands. The international community, once distant, now turned its gaze toward the small nation with big resources. Obiang became the face of stability for foreign investors. He formed alliances, strengthened his political standing, and used the country's newfound wealth to consolidate his leadership. Infrastructure grew. Modern buildings rose from the ground, and Equatorial Guinea transformed in ways few could imagine. But even as wealth increased, criticism followed. Human rights groups pointed to restrictions on free speech. Political opposition remained weak. Electoral transparency was frequently questioned. And the vast oil wealth raised another question: who truly benefited from it? Yet despite all this, one thing remained constant: Teodoro Obiang's seat of power. Through decade after decade, while the world saw the end of the Cold War, the birth of the Internet, global financial crises, new nations rising, old regimes falling, and presidents across continents changing again and again, Obiang remained. Children born when he first took power grew up, had families of their own, and still knew only one president. He became an unshakable symbol of continuity, for better or for worse. By the time the world entered the 2020s, Obiang had surpassed every other active president on Earth in length of time in office, not just in Africa, but globally. His rule had stretched across more than 4 decades. His presidency became a unique political phenomenon, a story of power, survival, and unbroken control in a world where few leaders last more than a few years.
And so today, as of November 2025, Teodoro Obiang Nguema Mbasogo stands as the world's longest-serving president still in office, over 43 years at the helm, a figure who has endured coups, crises, global shifts, and the ever-changing tides of political history. Supporters view him as a stabilizing force, the leader who restored order to a nation torn apart by the terror of his predecessor. They credit him with bringing development, peace, and international recognition. Critics argue he built a system where power revolves around him, where democracy struggles to grow, and where political freedom remains limited. They point to elections with suspicious results and to wealth imbalances fueled by decades of oil income. But regardless of perspective, one fact remains undeniable. Obiang has carved his name into world history. He has become a leader whose time in office has lasted longer than the lifetimes of many modern political careers combined. The story of the world's longest-serving president is not simply a tale of one man's power. It is a mirror reflecting the complexity of leadership in a young nation shaped by colonialism, dictatorship, oil wealth, and the lasting shadows of history. It is a reminder that longevity in power can be both a symbol of stability and a sign of political entrenchment, a legacy that will continue to spark debates for generations to come. As we close this chapter on World Unveilers, remember that every nation carries its own story, one shaped by its past, its leaders, and its people's hopes for the future. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the most unique leadership journeys in the world, make sure to subscribe, like, and join us again as we unveil more stories hidden behind the world's most powerful events, places, and personalities. This is World Unveilers, where history finds its voice.